Okay, so this is Linda again, and it's assessment task 4, and I'm chatting to Catherine, who's having difficulty building rapport with Nick. So, Catherine, you've told me a few things about how you've engaged with Nick and the things that you're finding difficult, and you've also said that you're feeling out of your depth with this client. And I have had a couple of thoughts about why I think there might be some difficulty building rapport with Nick, and maybe we can mull those over. I'm sure you've thought about some of these things too, but there's always two heads are always better than one. So I think the first thing for me was the fact that Nick is Chinese, and he's also a 26-year-old male. Now, I don't know whether during assessment that was picked up, and he was asked about what his choice was or what his preference would be rather for a counsellor. So I'm not sure if there might be some difficulty there for him with you being a female counsellor and him being from a different cultural background and being male. So that might be something to explore with him. So that's one possibility. So of course the issue there, that one of the consequences could be is that he might feel that maybe you have some conflict with or some difficulty engaging with him, whereas he might be quite comfortable with you. The good part of that question is that if he does feel uncomfortable, then he'll be grateful that you've also offered him the opportunity to engage with maybe a male counsellor, or you could refer him on to a service that may be more culturally appropriate for him, more cold friendly than perhaps our services. So those are a couple of things to think about there. The next thing that I wondered about is how complete the assessment process was, because one of the things that I wondered about was how complete a picture you had of Nick's situation, whether perhaps there was a complete psychosocial and ecological assessment completed, because it seems like Nick's having difficulty identifying exactly what his goal would be. He's presented saying that, yes, I'd like to not feel so disconnected from the world, and yet what does that mean? So I'm wondering if that might be something you could explore with him, like perhaps when did he first start feeling disconnected from the world? What does that actually mean to him? What does it mean to be disconnected? Does it mean that he hasn't got friends? Does it mean that he's cognitively dissociating? What does it actually mean? So that might be something to be able to explore with him, and I think that would just be possibly a brainstorming session for Nick, like what those different things, what his interpretations of them are, and what his perspective is on that. So in line with that too would be possibly thinking about the miracle question. That could be something that you could ask him, if he woke up tomorrow and he didn't feel disconnected from his world, what would that actually look like? What would he be doing? Who would he be with? How would he be feeling? How would things be different from how they are today? So that might be another thing to explore with him as well. I think that opens up the whole conversation about then how has he been in the past when he hasn't had those feelings of being disconnected, and also possibly exploring when those feelings of being disconnected first started for Nick and what was happening around those times. So you can look at like the before and also look at after the miracle question. So is there any congruity? Is there any overlap there between those and what was happening in the before and that we could replicate again in the after? So those are a couple of things there. The other thing I wondered about is whether he had a mental health diagnosis with feeling of being disconnected. Now, I do understand that you did the measure for suicide ideation, and he was at no risk for that, and also his depression score was quite low as well. But that might mean not necessarily discount other diagnoses. So I'm not sure whether that was explored with him at intake or whether you've been able to have a yarn with him about that too. So that could be another possibility. And I think the good thing about asking him if he has had a mental health assessment is that it brings it out into the open then, and also if he has had one, it forms a basis from which you can working on how those mental health diagnoses have impacted him, how they manifest in his life. If he hasn't had a mental health assessment recently, there may be a possibility of suggesting that, maybe further down the track, but not right now. So sometimes with the rapport building, if people aren't feeling well enough, it's very difficult for them to actually communicate as well. So those are some of the reasons that I think that you may be having a little bit of difficulty. And I'm happy to have a chat about those too a little bit further if you'd like to explore them. So the other thing I wondered about too, actually, before we close and move on, is if he does have a mental health diagnosis, or even if he doesn't, and he is from a cultural and linguistically diverse background, maybe he'd like a support person with him if he doesn't actually need a male counsellor or feel he would like a male counsellor. So that might be something else to explore with him. And another thing I wondered about is if you were doing the ORS and the SRS surveys with him, you might be able to figure out what's working for him and actually using that feedback as a point to jump off for the next session with him. So I think that would be a good starting point, and I'll just leave that with you. So the next part of the task 4 was that I need to come up with 3 reflective questions that I'd like to ask Catherine to encourage some reflective practice. And I need to explain how each of these would encourage reflection. So the first one I've thought about, well, what are the assumptions, beliefs and values that underpin Catherine's therapeutic approach? So I thought that this question might encourage curiosity about why she felt out of depth, what was her expectations of herself. It also gives her an opportunity to make the connection between her own personal values, beliefs and assumptions of her role, as well as how do they help Nick in his dilemma. The second question was, what does Catherine understand about Nick's home and social environment and the context in which the problem has presented? So I felt that question would help her reflect on what she does and does not understand or know about Nick's situation, and whether she has any information or whether she needs more information about his psychosocial and ecological framework. So what's happening for Nick in those? So and also I thought that she could learn from Nick and about Nick in the 2 sessions that she's had to date, and what has she been able to identify as needs within those the psychosocial and the ecological framework. So I thought those would be good reflective questions for her too. And the third question was, what has the experience taught her about herself? Why I chose that question was I thought that it speaks to having to think about her adequacy of knowledge and skills, and also to identify any gaps in her learning or her practice capacity. So it also helps to increase her self-awareness and to develop a better understanding of her strengths and elements of practice that might need that are challenged and she might need some extra support with. I also thought it would help Catherine to modify her approach to Nick if she understands, what her capabilities are, and also to help her decide whether his needs are beyond her capabilities, and if they are, to refer him on, and if they aren't, then how is she going to modify her practice and her approach and her interventions to help Nick achieve the best outcomes. Thank you.